Hello, fellow readers and booktubers. This is my quarterly report for the second quarter of 2025, the books that I read during the second quarter of 2025. I'm not going to go through these books in the order that I read them in. I've kind of put them in order of category. I think on the list below, I'll list all the titles in the chronological order as I read them. But let's begin with poetry. Jack Gilbert's The Dance Most of All. Gilbert was a wonderful poet, kind of a lean, very masculine kind of poetry. This book, I think it might have been his last. It's very sad, very nostalgic. He thinks about love's lost and some of the women he has known. But there's as I said, it's sad, but it's not sentimental. It's very straightforward kind of poetry. It's quite moving. I enjoyed it a great deal. I also read T.S. Eliot's Four Quartets. I don't know if this was the 5th or 6th or 10th or 11th time I've read these, but they're wonderful pieces. I read each one of these on a Thursday, on a Poetry Thursday. So each Thursday I would read one of the quartets. Sometimes reading poetry aloud, it hits differently, and Eliot always does. What more can I say? The man was a genius, and a genius with the language, the Four Quartets. And then Unsalted Blue Sunrise by Kathryn Haydon. This was a surprise, an unexpected addition to my poetry bookshelf. I had met the poet here at a dinner with some friends, and she gifted me with her latest collection of books. These are, it says on the side here, Poems of Lake Michigan. I remember Miss Haydon talking about how much she admired William Carlos Williams, and that really shows in the structure of her poems. But also there's a hint of Walt Whitman in here, her connection to nature, and just really a wonderful find. I keep meaning to give her a call. I'd like to set up an interview with her on Zoom, so maybe that'll be coming in the next few months. But anyway, Unsalted Blue Sunrise. I strongly recommend it. A new and wonderful voice in American poetry. In terms of philosophy, a recent translation of the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. Again, the Meditations I've read a number of times, different translations. This time around, I don't know, it's got nothing to do with the translation, but I wasn't as impressed with it as I had been in years past. It's very repetitious. It's interesting. I mean, these are the thoughts of a Roman emperor after all. But in terms of it being a statement of Stoicism, it seems kind of lacking. But I'm glad I read it. I recommend it to anyone who doesn't know what Stoicism is. It's kind of a good entry point into it, but don't think of this as the ultimate statement of Stoicism, for they'd have to go to Epictetus or people like that. But anyway. And then when it comes to nonfiction history, E.R. Dodds' Pagan and Christian in an Age of Anxiety. This was published, quite some time ago. This edition was published in 1990. The original came out in 1965. Dodds was a leading scholar of ancient Greek history, but he's also fascinated in late antiquity. And in this was actually a couple of lectures that he gave dealing with pagans and Christians in the 3rd and 4th century, right around the time the ancient world was starting to implode or turn in on itself. And he's just exploring these different concepts. It's a very interesting book. I marked a couple of things in here. What I found so interesting about it is that he made some statements way back in the 1960s that could just as easily apply today. And what he's doing in this book is exploring how religions, both pagan and Christian, respond to certain cultural and historical tensions in a society. And early in his introduction, he mentions, he says, C.G. Jung, the great psychiatrist, remarks somewhere that, quote, long before 1933, there was already a faint smell of burning in the air. This feeling that something horrible was coming, and many of us feel that now. In fact, some would argue it's here. But reading this book, what Dodds does is he points out how religion of any kind often will respond to these things, and people will grasp at very ancient cults or newer religions like Christianity was at the time. Here's a line: no doubt much of the increasing demand for oracles simply reflects the increasing insecurity of the times. He's talking about how paganism was hanging on even at about the time the Roman Empire was being Christianized. And then my favorite: from a world so impoverished intellectually, so insecure materially, so filled with fear and hatred as the world of the 3rd century, any path that promised escape must have attracted serious minds. Boy, oh boy. Talk about relevant today, but even if you don't want to get into, the relevance to today's society, this is still a wonderful examination of the Roman Empire or the ancient world as it was starting to come unraveled. Very good. I really enjoyed this one. Also, biography of Caligula. This was part of my Roman emperors reading challenge, which is going very slowly. I apologize for those of you who have been waiting for the next installment. It's coming. It'll be on Claudius, of course. But this was a book on Caligula. It was an interesting book because it took a slightly revisionist view that maybe Caligula wasn't quite the monster that he's been made out to be through the millennia. But Caligula. This was a book by Caligula was by Aloys Winterling. An historian I wasn't really familiar with, but he does a wonderful job with this. This is fairly recent. Mary T. Clark's Augustine, Philosopher of Freedom. This is St. Augustine. This was kind of difficult. It was heavy-duty philosophical work, but interesting nonetheless. I'm not sure I'd recommend it to anyone unless you're really interested in philosophy and really interested in St. Augustine. My interest: St. Augustine, a lot. Philosophy, a little bit. But anyway, read that. And then The Trip to Echo Spring by Olivia LAing. I just completed this one recently. This was really interesting. It's an examination of writers and drinking, particularly alcoholism. It starts out a little unfocused, but as the book goes on, her focus sharpens more and more. She focuses in on certain authors of the 20th century: Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Tennessee Williams, and the rest. And she just kind of looks at how alcoholism affected their writing and their lives. As I said, it starts out a little fuzzy. I wasn't sure she was going to be able to pull it all together well, but she certainly does by the midpoint, and certainly by the end of it. It's quite moving, and it's very sad. But those of you who are writers out there, I would recommend this, especially if you're struggling with the bottle. And then On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. I did a short little 30-second video on this one. This book, when it first came out, it was kind of a warning of what was coming. It came out about 10 years ago, and now what was being warned about is here. This book is quite thin, doesn't take long to read, and the dimensions of it are such that you keep it in the back pocket while you're on the run. I would strongly recommend it. There's a lot of historical examples here of how tyrannies come about and what happens when they take root. When I first read this, I put it in the history section of my library, but I've since moved it into the current events section. I'd strongly recommend it, and it might get you through some hard times to come, and they are coming. And then in terms of fiction, at one point, about a month or two ago, I was suffering some booktube burnout. I was still reading, but without as much joy as I usually read. I was reading more, but enjoying it less, as I like to say. And then The Uncommon Reader came knocking at my door by Alan Bennet. A couple of other booktubers have mentioned this book with great fondness. It's more of a novella. It's very short. You can read it in an hour or two. But it's wonderful. It's very funny. It deals with Queen Elizabeth, not Shakespeare's Queen Elizabeth, but the Queen Elizabeth who recently died. And the premise of the book is that Queen Elizabeth begins to read novels, and she loves reading, and she can't get enough of reading, and it's very funny. There's even a bit of a punchline at the end, as if this is a setup for a big joke, although I don't know if the punchline would land as well now that she's gone as it did when the book first came out. But along the way, there are these wonderful insights into the joys of reading, the importance of reading, the healing that reading can bring. It's a great, if you're a reader, I'd really recommend this. It's wonderful. And as far as the healing that reading can bring, Michael Cunningham, The Hours, I mentioned this, I read this about a week ago, and I had posted something about it. I read this not long after the deaths of both my mother and my mother-in-law. Thank you, by the way, for those of you who sent your condolences. This book is, death is an ever-present kind of character in this book. It's a work of fiction. Virginia Woolf is in it, but as a fictional character, and some other characters that are based on her fictional characters are in this in different forms. It's a sad book. It's not sickly sentimental by any means. It's just a very honest book and a very honest look at tragic lives that never quite reach their fulfillment or their full potential. It's The Hours by Michael Cunningham. And then a while back on BookTube, someone had posted something about the March of the Mammoths, I think it was called, and everyone responded to this, including myself. And these are books that you've read that are in excess of 800 pages, the big books. Well, this past quarter, I read some books. These are not, they don't exactly qualify as mammoths, but they're pretty big, thick books. And so these are like my junior mammoths that I read in the last quarter. And I just want to discuss these in order of their, order that I enjoyed them. First of all the King's Men by Robert Penn Warren, a true American classic, deserves all the accolades it's gotten over the years. And yes, it did win the Pulitzer. I think it was back in the mid-40s. This is the restored version. The original version of this, there are chunks of it that have been edited out. But this is the restored version. It is an American classic. It's not to be missed if you've never read it. It's very moving, it's very insightful. Just a great book. This, of the three mammoths, this was the first one. This leads the herd. And then Barbara Kingsolver, Demon Copperhead. This was a bestseller. I think it was just last year or the year before. This was good. I enjoyed it. I think it will probably be around for a while. The author, again, I've mangled her name here, Barbara Kingsolver. She's written a number of other novels. In this one, and then afterward to this, she mentions there was a very conscious connection to David Copperfield in this. It's kind of a modern version of a typical Dickens story about people who suffered through lives of poverty and despair and how they survived this. This one takes place, I think, in Kentucky, maybe. If I'm wrong on that, I'll probably see it in the comments. It's a very powerful book, and I think it'll be remembered for a while. I'm not sure it's going to be regarded as a true classic, but it was good. I'm glad I read it. And then Donna Tartt's The Secret History. I always heard a lot about this one, published in the 1990s. It's a very popular classic, I think, but I don't know if it's ever going to reach the pantheon of true literature. It promises more than it delivers. At least that was my experience of this. So, The Secret History, Demon Copperhead, and then, of course, the real classic, All the King's Men by Robert Penn Warren. This is the big one. This is of the three junior mammoths that I read, this is the one I would recommend if you've never read it before. So anyway, that's my quarterly report for the second quarter of 2025. And take care of yourselves and never stop reading.